I didn't manage to watch this movie in cinemas, but Netflix just suddenly dropped it and without any prior notice. So finally, I got the chance to see it, and let's talk about Godzilla Minus One. Before we get into this video, my analytics show me that you guys are only here for about like 30 seconds. So if you like movie, anime, and game reviews, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Anyway, back to the video. Netflix just dropped this without any warning. Usually Netflix will like to promote the movies that they get, the movies that they can show, so that they get people watching it. But they just dropped this out of nowhere. Even I didn't know that this movie was already available on Netflix until I saw it on my timeline somewhere. And yeah, they did more promotion for Rebel Moon instead of this movie. And luckily for them, a lot of people found out that Godzilla Minus One was already available on Netflix. And yeah, the numbers show, because I think at one point it's been #1 on Netflix and on iTunes at the same time, which hasn't been done before. So Godzilla Minus One takes place in the post-World War II period of Japan, and we follow this supposedly kamikaze pilot named Shikishima, who kind of gets cold feet and fakes that his plane has a problem, and he goes to this island called Oda Island to get it repaired. And while on Oda Island, him and the maintenance crew are attacked by Godzilla. But this is not the final Godzilla. This is just like an ancient creature that normally comes to the surface, and he attacks the maintenance crew, and Shikishima gets the chance to kill this creature then and there. Once again he hesitates, and this leads to countless deaths. So Shikishima makes his way back to Tokyo only to find that his parents have died, and his neighbor Sumiko has lost her children, and she is surprised to see him alive because he's supposed to be a kamikaze pilot. He should not be alive. He should have died during the war. And she blames him for the death of his children. He also kind of blames himself because during the Odo Island attack by Godzilla, his hesitation cost people their lives, and he feels the weight of their lives on his shoulders. Then through a few events, he ends up housing Noriko and a baby by the name of Akiko. Now, Noriko also lost her family during the war, and Akiko's mother passed her on to Noriko as she was dying. So now they're forming this tiny little makeshift family, and Shikishima gets a job detonating mines, and him and the crew get close, and so he's slowly rebuilding his life. While at the same time, the Americans are carrying out nuclear testing at Bikini Atoll, and this turns that just ancient creature that was just a normal creature into this radioactive monstrosity that is Godzilla. And Godzilla is on his way to Tokyo. And so Shikishima and his crew encounter Godzilla, and that is kind of the setup of the movie, is how do we stop this force of nature from destroying Tokyo and destroying the people we love. One of the major strengths of this movie, as opposed to Legendary's Monsterverse, is that this movie actually gets us to care about the struggle of the human characters involved in this movie. Because we see them go through and survive and reminisce about the adversity and horrors of war, and now they are faced with a threat of similar magnitude. And this movie really shows the power of the human spirit to come together, to endure, and to find solutions to problems so that we may survive into the future. And I think that is the biggest theme, the importance of life, the ability to come together as human beings and just to fight for a better future. Now, for the biggest talking point of this movie that everybody has been talking about since it was released, and that is the visual effects. This movie won the Oscar for Best Visual Effects on a budget of just $12 million for the entire movie. And that has blown people's minds, because hundreds of millions of dollars blockbusters with that much have CGI that is somehow much worse. So how did this team manage to create the CGI in this movie, which is honestly great? In some parts the CGI is quite noticeable, but the CG for especially Godzilla is so on point. You have seen the highlight reel of Godzilla in this movie powering up his radioactive blast as the dorsal scales light up. Man, that is an incredible visual moment, and that is the money shot. That's the shot that won them the Oscar, and they truly deserve it because, like I said, I don't know how they've managed to pull it off with quite a very small budget compared to these major Hollywood blockbusters. Heck, even Furiosa had a bigger budget and had much more noticeable CGI. So kudos to the visual effects studio and the visual artists for being able to put this together for very little money, and they truly, well and truly deserve their Oscar. Now I see a lot of people are comparing this movie to the Monsterverse and how this movie is a bit more grounded, a bit more serious, while the Monsterverse seems a bit more goofy and aloof. But we can appreciate both these movies for what they are. Like I said, the Legendary and their Monsterverse, they figured out that we don't really care about the human characters. So that's why they're focusing more on the kaiju, on Kong and Godzilla. Whereas this movie is focused on its human characters and how they overcome the threat of this incredibly powerful being that is Godzilla. And yeah, we should be able to enjoy these very different movies that both use Godzilla for what they are, because they both throw back to very different eras of Godzilla. The Legendary Monsterverse is throwing back to the Showa era of Godzilla, where he's fighting with a bunch of different monsters. And if you go online, you can find clips made in Japan, of movies made in Japan, that are just 100 times more silly than what happens in those movies. So I think we can enjoy them because they throw back to that period of Godzilla's history, whereas Godzilla Minus One throws back to Godzilla's first appearance, this force of nature that is a parallel for nuclear bombing, for the nuclear war that Japan experienced. Now, while the story and CG was incredible, I have to caveat, because there are two moments that really they didn't sit well with me, and they kind of brought the movie down a little bit. It does not make the movie bad, but I think we could have done without those moments, and they happened right at the very end. So I still think you have an incredible package here. Just those two moments kind of soured me a little bit on the movie, but I still love this movie. I give Godzilla Minus One an 8 out of 10. Anyway, have you seen Godzilla Minus One either on Netflix when they dropped it, or if you were the lucky ones to watch it in cinemas? Please let me know what you think of the movie. What do you think of this Godzilla movie compared to Godzilla x Kong? And I'll see you in the next video.